The Single Tracks podcast is brought to you by TPC, the Pros Closet. Now is the perfect time to upgrade, and TPC has an industry-leading selection of new and certified pre-owned bikes, plus frames, wheels, and accessories. Each certified pre-owned bike is inspected, tested, and serviced, and every bike includes 30-day returns. Visit tpc.bike/singletracks and enter code SingleTracks40 to save $40 on every order over $200. That's the Pros Closet at tpc.bike/singletracks. And look for the link and coupon code in the show notes. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Tracks podcast. My name is Jeff, and today my guest is Nate Zukas. Nate is a frame builder living in Augusta, Georgia. He's been building bikes since 2011, and he works in steel, titanium, and aluminum. Thanks for joining me, Nate.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So how'd you get started in frame building? How'd you first learn how to do it, and what made you kind of want to pursue it?
So I had like a little short history with building cafe racers out of old Honda motorcycles from the early 70s.
Yeah.
So, the welding, fabrication, taking these old heaps of metal and making them into something kind of cool and run them around, and I would sell it, move on to the next project, actually make a little money on it, which was kind of nice. And then had a couple of people suggest, you should make your own frame. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. So this is probably maybe around 2009, 2010 or so.
Okay.
And I started looking at all these, forums, photo bucket accounts, whatnot. And just you're looking at everyone's build pictures, and it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I've always had a little bit of issue with stock geometry.
Uh-huh.
When the manufacturer's building frames, they can't fit every single individual. They'll have 50 sizes to one model, and they just can't do that.
Right.
So for my height, I'm like a click below 5'7". I got a 32-inch inseam, and I got these real long arms as well. So I could ride a 56 comfortably. Don't look right on it, but I could. So it's always an issue for me. But I would make it work. Real long stems, run long cranks, seat really jacked up high out of a frame for road riding. So it's like, why not? I'm going to try this. And night after night, laptop in my chest, looking at these Flickr accounts with Photo Bucket, and my wife's like, "What are you looking at?" And it's like people building their own bike frames. It's like, what's involved with that? It's like, well, you got to get a frame jig. How much is that? And it's like, it's like, do I reveal the right price? What do I do now? And it's like, it costs this much. And this went on for months. And she finally just says, like, well, just try it. And so I did. So I bought the jig, and it showed up, ordered some tubes and lugs, just like everybody else starts off with. Must have sat there and looked at those lugs for weeks, envisioning what I'm going to do, my plan of attack. It's probably one of the fastest frames I ever built, because I was just so pumped up and enthused about doing this. I really wanted to see what this is all about. And I remember finally getting together. It's raw. I built it up. It's just a fixed gear bike. Kept it really super simple. And I remember it's like, I'm going to ride it to work. And when I did, it was definitely a neat experience, because I'm going down this hill. I'm like, I made this thing. I sure hope it holds together. But after a couple of rides to work, and then just generally just riding it around, I was like, this is kind of cool. It actually fits me, and just really enjoyed the experience. And then a buddy of mine riding with, it's like, can you make me a fixed gear? It'd be kind of fun to tool around in the wintertime in a fixed gear. And I was like, sure. And made him a frame. And it's like, I'm going to make me a cyclocross bike. I was really big into cyclocross racing at the time. I made the frame, painted it this really cool color and all, went to a cyclocross race. And I was trying to warm up for the race, and this guy comes running over. He's like, hey, who made that frame? Who made that frame? And it's like, oh, well, I did. And I didn't need to say after the conversation, I didn't get a chance to warm up for my race. It was an awful race at that point. But 2 weeks later, he contacts me and said, hey, can you make me one? And a buddy of mine wants one. And I was like,
oh, wow.
Like, I think I can make that happen. But give me a couple weeks, though. So got insurance, did a whole thing. next thing you know, it's just kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. And so that's what you do full time now? Was there some point where you said, this is what I'm going to do? Sounds like you were working at the time you built your first one.
Yeah. So I was working for a shop called Annie Jordan's downtown in Augusta, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I've actually had worked there for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
Almost 3 years ago now. So from that point of approximately around 2011, for almost 10 years, I was working full time, head mechanic, and also doing this frame building at the same time.
Wow.
And my 40s, I don't know where they went. They just disappeared. And I have no idea what happened. But somehow I had this energy level, and I still do. Yeah, I'm very motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night now when I'm done working out in the shop. Whereas before I would come home 6-ish or so, maybe get some riding in, do some yard work, spend some time with the wife. She'd go to bed 9 o'clock or so because she has to get up early for work. And I'm out there pretty darn early in the morning sometimes, between 2 to 4 sometimes, and then get up and go do it all again.
Wow.
So it took some dedication and patience and a lot of coffee to get it going.
I'm sure. Well, so what was it, that the guy who saw your bike at the cyclocross race, like, what was it about the bike that you think attracted him? And I mean, sounds like it's almost just kind of like one look. Like he saw the bike and was like, wow, that's awesome, or that's special. Like, what do you think it was about the bike that kind of drew people in from such an early stage?
Well, it was a very unusual bike at the time because there's a lot of aluminum frames and a lot of carbon fiber frames. Mm-hmm. So to see something with skinny tubes, polished out stainless steel lugs, a bright green finish with integrated seat mast, he kind of stuck out. And he was a bike shop owner, of all things, up in, I think, Dalton, Georgia. I can't remember his name right now, and I feel real bad. But he owned a very large shop up there. And I think it's just the clean looks and lines of it. And more, he got closer to it and saw that it had internal cable routing and all these little fine details and whatnot. I think that just really is like, wow, this is really cool. And it's something totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I want to talk more about that, about how you can stand out as sort of a custom frame builder. But before that, I want to talk about the materials you work in. Is it unusual for a frame builder to work in both steel and aluminum? Seems like a lot of frame builders tend to stick with one or the other.
Yeah. I think most frame builders, for the most part, they start off with steel. And then you start off with either lugs like I did. You move on to fillet brazing. And then in some cases, they eventually move on to TIG welding. And then I just had made a comment for somebody who commented on one of my posts about fillet brazing and TIG welding. Once you go on TIG welding, it's very hard to go back to fillet brazing. It's just the time and work and involved with it. But once you've gotten to TIG welding, that opens up the avenue, or doors rather, for other materials, say aluminum, which has to be TIG welded. And then for myself, I have now ventured off to titanium, which obviously has to be TIG welded. So to actually be able to do 3 materials, and with all 3 materials actually slightly combine carbon fiber with it, with the integrated seat mast. It's pretty unique. There's not too many builders doing that. Yeah. But one thing that's kind of unique is that it gives potential customer clients an option for all 3 materials. Yeah. Steel is still by far the most popular. I mean, the ride quality, the price, obviously, is the 2 main things. The unfortunate thing with steel, it does weigh a little bit more. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, is there like different equipment involved or different processes for working with these different materials, or do you kind of, I mean, once you made the investment in kind of your equipment, is it easy to go between those different materials?
Yeah, for me, it kind of evolved. Lugs was the cheapest, easiest tools I have on hand to make a frame. And then when I ventured off and started, it's like, you know what, these angles of these lugs are not working with the geometries that I have in my mind that I want to create. So that I start mitering the tubes together and join them together with brass. So that opened up a whole other avenue, but it kind of moved on to a little bit different equipment compared to the lugs. And now I'm kind of You need machines that will help me miter a tube a little more accurately compared to filing it. You can do a file and come out really great, but 2 seconds with a machine compared to 30 minutes of sitting there with a file, in some cases, if you want to get it nice and tight.
Yeah.
So that has evolved there. And then, of course, when you get into TIG, now you got to get a decent welder, the back purging of the steel tubes. And then when I went to titanium, that was a whole nother level. For 10 years, I went with no air conditioning in my workshop. So imagine being out there on a day like today, welding away, and then having to take a break for a second, let all the sweat drip off you, turn the fan on, because you can't have air moving when you're TIG welding. Your argon purge gas will blow away. So you don't want that happening. It'll contaminate the weld. So with titanium, you want it to be absolutely no air movement at all, so I could cool the shop down. In some cases, turn the AC off. So that was a whole other investment as well. And then actually upgrading my jig. That was probably one of the most costly things I've done over the years, but really made a big improvement in my process and the ability to back purge the tubes even when you tack the tubes together, which was super important with even titanium. Titanium is a very sensitive material to oxygen, and especially if you're welding it, that's not good if you're not blocking that oxygen out.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't see a lot of, obviously you see custom builders working in steel and titanium, and you don't see as many working in aluminum. I assume that was because aluminum was maybe harder to work with or something like that, but it sounds like it's really just demand. People don't want custom aluminum bikes as much as they want steel. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, steel is here. When you think custom, for most people, I think the first thing that pops up in their mind is, chromoly steel, custom bike. You see the shows and you see all the pretty lugs, the Phillip raising and intricate shapes they carve into them, and that's all steel. I don't think they really understand that you can get that same stuff, or you can get a custom frame in aluminum. I'm one of the few. There's a handful of builders out there. Definitely not as many as steel, but aluminum is. It's actually very easy to fabricate with. It's just the welding. Is pretty tricky. I mean, there's a lot of settings on your welder, electronegative and positive, and just like all kinds of stuff to get a decent looking weld, and the technique of welding it. And at any point, this material can disappear from you rather quickly. It looks like liquid mercury when you're welding along, but it's actually once you get it, it's kind of relaxing to me. I like the sound that the welder makes, the AC buzz, and moving along. I'm not pulsing. I'm manually pulsing, controlling the voltage going into it. It's neat kind of getting into it.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah. So, I mean, we kind of talked about how people prefer certain materials for their frames over others for the ride feel. As a frame builder, how much can you affect the ride feel and performance of a bike based on kind of how you put it together? I mean, in terms of selecting the tubes and that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Tubing diameters is one thing that I'm really fond of as far as affecting ride quality. Top tubes are kind of a thing for me. A thinner diameter top tube really can affect the ride quality as far as comfort goes and flex. Down tube is very important as well. The shape of it, sometimes the thickness of the walls can really determine if the frame's going to be really stiff or responsive. I mean, I take some notes of what the rider is going to be doing with the bike, but also at the same time, you got to kind of think about, you don't want to make this thing really lightweight and easily dented and whatnot. Say like an adventure bike, for example. Is it going to be seeing extra weight on it? But at the same time, the person wants it to be their gravel race bike of all things. So it's definitely has changed for me in that the beginning was a lot of it based on their weight, how responsive they want it. But the bike was kind of like used for one sole purpose. As a cyclocross race bike, it was their wintertime riding fixed gear bike. Now it's like I'm combining 2 to 3 bikes into one bike. It's going to be their road bike. It's going to be their gravel bike. But I'm going to put all these braze-ons on it as well. I want to put bags and go on adventures. It's like, so sometimes the builds have become a little more challenging. So now you got to think about that. build this thing super stiff, but how's it going to feel when he goes just rides the bike? So I think they come out real well, and as far as trying to make 3 bikes into one.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're definitely choosing tubing diameters, again, a little bit of wall thicknesses. As far as materials go, steel will flex a little bit more, so that's the comfort. Aluminum is notorious for being stiffer. Everyone thinks it's going to be a Cannondale, but you can make it ride like a steel frame by using different tubing diameters. And then titanium, in my opinion, I think is the ultimate metal for a bike. It combines everything, and it's light and doesn't corrode. And it's got really good dent resistance. I've tested it.
Yeah. You're a pretty big mountain biker from what I can tell. What's sort of your style of riding?
First time I ever rode a mountain bike was in 86, and the first time I ever raced a mountain bike was in 87, so kind of revealing my age now, pretty old. But when I go ride a mountain bike, it's fast. I'm flying through the woods. I get my heart rate up. It seems like the newer styles now are, you got to have a dropper seat post, and you're flying, jumping off things. It's not my style. I just like going fast and handling through the woods, a little two-wheel drifts through the turn, and just having fun riding by myself most of the time. I occasionally ride with some of the faster guys in town, and quickly reminded that I'm 51 years old.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that you're sort of selective about which projects you'll work on. Is that true?
I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, if there's something that I know that I just can't handle, I'll pass on it. You have to. I mean, hopefully, I have enough in my customer base, and I have people coming back to me now for second bikes. Everything that's in my build list is stuff that I feel comfortable building.
Okay.
There's some things that I won't build a fat tire bike for snow. I've never ridden one. I don't know what it does. I get it. I understand why. And I don't get too many requests of it, probably because what is a guy in middle Georgia going to know about a fat tire bike? And I get that. Tandems. I've never ridden I've ridden on the back of a tandem, but I've never steered one, so I don't really understand them. I'll pass that off to someone else. Plus, I have the world's smallest workshop for building frames, and I just don't have room for a tandem, nor to paint one as well. But I've kind of opened up a little bit on my some of my limitations that were before, and the customers are kind of heading towards this, or the market rather, is 50 mil tires with sometimes 2x chain rings. And, chain stays area, that is probably the most frustrating part for me. And I feel probably the same for a lot of frame builders. You're trying to get clearances for a big tire. You're trying to make clearances for a single or double ring and crank arms. Yeah. And it's just a nightmare area. But technology has caught up. They luckily have moved some chain lines out now, using wider bottom bracket shells. I have some things I've been doing now to accommodate that as well. So yeah, I've evolved, and there's plenty of famous builders out there, and I've been doing it for as long as I've been alive, and more than that. And they only build a lugged steel frame, and that's what they're known for. They're not going to change. People come to them, that's what they want. So yeah, unfortunately, not too many people came to me after when I evolved from lugs. I just started. I think they come more towards me for a bike they're actually going to, ride, race, the way I do the cables. People love the seat stays that I do, things like that. Yeah. So I have to kind of accommodate that too. If you don't evolve with it, then you're still stuck in the Stone Ages on some components of bikes. So nothing wrong with rim brakes and all, but I definitely moved on to disc brakes and whatnot, and kept up with the times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned that there are certain types of projects you're not really interested in taking on. What about certain clients? Like, how can people be a good custom bike client? I'm sure there are some things that, it's a tough process. Like, to me, it's overwhelming. I've never built a custom or had a custom bike built for myself, just because I know there's got to be so many questions and things that I don't know. And so what does like a good client look like? What does that person bring to the project?
But pretty much everybody that I'm building bikes for, it's not their first bike. So they've been riding for years, and they've come to the point in their life where they want a custom built bike. And usually, and things that make it a lot easier is that they have their fit needs already listed through a fit. And their points of contact is what I base the fit on. So that helps out a bunch. I'm going to have to honestly say that pretty much everyone I deal with is, for the most part, pretty easy. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Every once in a while you get a little something, but I mean, it's part of being in business. You're building a one-off custom thing. Some misinformation or lost in an email somewhere, or some conversation we had on phone didn't get recorded down and something got missed, but it didn't make the bike not ride right or anything like that. Or sometimes it's a little bit on the finishing process, colors. Mm-hmm. That's always a tough one because I do all my own paint work as well.
Oh, wow.
There's times I'm like, I really need to get someone else to do the paint work. This is pretty frustrating. But other than that, it's very smooth for the most part process.
Yeah.
Once you get it down to where the biggest thing that helps me out is a program called BikeCAD. So I actually design on a computer and I can present this to the customer.
Okay.
Like a drawing, showing the geometry, what's going to clear, what not, kind of how the bike is going to look. Mm-hmm. And that really helps out. So we go back and forth. Sometime I'm one and done. Sometime it's 10 revisions,
Wow. Yeah.
Plus, to get the geometry just right. But I think that helps out tremendously if it wasn't for that program. I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, how much of a frame build is sort of your vision versus the client's? Are you 50-50? Are you maybe more since you've done a lot of these? Like how does that shake out?
I think, in some cases, they just kind of let me roll with it. And it's like 90-95%. It's like I come up with it. Yeah, I get some, and I have some recently. They don't want a sloping top tube. I like a sloping top tube. So I'll give a little bit of a slope, just like a degree or two. And we compromised. I had one last year who didn't want the super swooping stays, but they wanted a gentle curve. So I kind of sent them the pictures, like, this is what I've come up with. And they're like, perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I compromise. Absolutely. And sometimes they're going to run axis shifting system, but they want the ability to run external cable routing. I'm like, well, once you go on axis, it's really hard to go back. And I get it. It's just in case. Who knows if axis doesn't exist. I think it's here to stay, and it's just going to get more and more. But you got a backup plan. I understand.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. How much of that too? Do people ever come to you with like crazy geometry where you just have to say, you know what, like, I don't think you're going to be happy with that?
I get a little bit here and there. Some of their ideas on some head tube angles for road and stuff like this. Like, I'm not quite sure that's going to be very stable on a downhill. And, one of my favorite tests is a pretty hilly neighborhood. When I occasionally build a complete bike, all the parts, everything, I built the wheels, I've assembled this whole thing, and I get to ride the bike before the customer does. And that's kind of fun to me because I come down the hill and just kind of check my work once in a while, and I'll throw the hands off the handlebar, and that handlebar is nice and straight. It's like good. No speed wobbles or anything like that. So everything seems good and tight. Yeah, I've had some where I kind of say, hey, I got a little experience on this, and I totally appreciate you coming to me with this idea, but you might want to kind of tone this head tube angle down a little bit to this. And they understand. And they're like, that's why I wanted to get your professional advice, you might say. And sure, let's do that if you think it's going to be right.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it, and obviously anybody who's familiar with your bikes has seen your swoopy seat stays, which are really unique and make your bike stand out. Was the idea behind that to make the bike stand out? Was this like an artistic choice, or is there like some practical reason that you started doing your seat stays like that?
It really all evolved from my constantly looking at other people's builds. So it's a slight combination of borrowing it from Speedwagon, which is a really big, popular, custom bikes, and English cycles. So I kind of combined the two, but kind of came up with my own curves, you might say, where the bends are. Speedwagon for the curves, English cycles for the actual diameter of the stays.
Okay.
He uses a much thinner, even thinner than I go. But so I went a little bit thicker and a little bit different curves.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of came up with my own thing. So it's not 100% mine, but I don't think, I mean, there's stuff that I've done that in other parts of the frame that I've seen other builders adopt is a nice word to say, and which fine with me. So I borrowed and been influenced from other companies, and I feel like that some of the stuff I put out there has now been borrowed and influenced other builders. So I think it's kind of cool, actually. I kind of, in a very roundabout way, kind of gave back a little bit to the community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember the first time I saw one of your bikes, the seat stays stood out for sure. I mean, they look impossibly thin. And you're like, how is that strong enough? And, I mean, I've seen this on mountain bikes and people ride them for years. They are strong enough. But yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about how a lot of builders use paint to try to kind of distinguish their builds. But at this point, I mean, I don't know that there's any paint job that would surprise me or would impress me. I mean, I've seen all kinds, and seems like there's endless things you can do with paint. But obviously, as a frame builder, the frame is the thing that you have control over. And so do you see that as kind of like a palette for artistic expression, or is a bike mostly just like a utilitarian kind of object?
So circling back to the seat stays, so yeah, definitely, like you said, it kind of sets it out. So it's definitely a little bit of art with that, and ride quality. So I think a curved seat stay gives a little bit of a give. It's not much. You physically can't see it, but it's there. To me, ones that are perfectly straight or setting whatever it is that you hit straight to the seat tube area ever so slightly. Some people probably argue with me on that, whatever. But getting down, I joke sometimes. People ask me about them, and it's like, well, it's 95% style, 5% compliance. That's kind of how I like to use it. So the art of making it, they're not easy to do, to keep everything looking the same, nice looking symmetry. One of the things I was kind of commented by somebody, I guess years ago, that in circling back to paint and the looks of a frame, that somebody didn't know the bike, but they saw it off in the distance, somebody riding it, they said that looked like a Zukas. Because of the aesthetics and the way everything was placed on the bike, slight slope, the S-bend seat stays, and just the general look of it. So I think now that maybe I kind of have a little bit of that kind of look, larger down tube, thinner top tube to S-bend, in a lot of cases integrated seat mats in all the materials or carbon in that area. So before it gets painted and don't put my name on it, I think a lot of people are recognizing it's like, oh, that's a Zukas style build, so, which is kind of cool. So, and that's, to me, says a lot, because a lot of people don't recognize the brand until they put paint on it and their label, head badge or whatever, and like, oh, that's a brand X. I recognize it now. So all stripped down and all naked, it looks, oh, that's a Zukas. Cool.
Yeah, very cool. So you kind of mentioned this in terms of some of the bikes you're working on right now, where clients are looking for bikes that can kind of do it all. These like all road type bikes that maybe they're going to ride gravel, maybe they're going to bike pack, and they want a kind of a bike that does it all. Are there other trends that you're seeing in terms of the types of frames that buyers want right now, or is that kind of the big one?
I think that's the big one, is gravel / adventure is the big thing. I mean, it's and I love building a gravel bike. It's my cyclocross bike today that I was building 10 years ago. I can knock out a cyclocross bike. And the funny thing about it to me, and I was just thinking about it the other day because of tire clearances, it's like I was freaking out trying to get a 35, 40 millimeter tire to fit in these stays. Like, oh, how am I going to make this work? And, these crazy bends I'm going to have to do, or dimples in the chain stays. And now I'm trying to figure out, it's like, how am I going to make a 2.1 clear with a, a 30 or 42 tooth chainring up front, and I'm making it work. And it's just, getting back to, you're having to keep up with the times and evolve to stay alive, you might say.
Yeah.
This is crazy how things have changed. Yeah, gravel adventure builds are definitely the big thing. A very funny kind of thing that's been kind of growing for me now is aluminum frame, rim brake road bikes.
Huh.
It's because the industry is going away from rim brakes.
Yeah.
So these purists, and I totally get it. They got their whatever parts they've been wanting to hold on to, and they're fine with rim brakes. It's like, well, the companies aren't really offering that anymore, so where are they going to go? And I've had numerous inquiries for rim brake road bikes, in which I had rim brake road bike and a disc brake cyclocross bike at the same time. When I would ride both on the road, I was like, golly. After that downhill, it's like, I'm not really sure about rim brakes anymore, but I totally get it. And so there might be kind of a different market in my future, because not too many, the big companies just are going away from it.
Yeah, but, interesting.
But a lot of, small, like Boyd Wheels, for example, are coming out with brand new rim brake rims, and there's some people are holding on to it, so, which it is kind of neat to see. So it might be a whole nother market for it. I don't particularly like rim brakes, but I'll build one all day long.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I mean, a lot of people do kind of worry. I don't know, maybe it's a fake worry, but when a new standard comes along, like say Boost, they worry, oh, I'm not going to have a bike for my wheels. And I mean, I guess I never thought about the fact that there's always going to be custom builders. And so you can get a frame that will fit whatever components you have. And so, it sounds like people are kind of going that route.
Whenever a new standard comes out, I get a little bit nervous, because it's like, oh, I got to learn something new, and how much is this going to cost me?
Right.
It's the two things.
Yeah.
The best standard for me that came out years ago was T47, the threaded press fit 30 style bottom bracket shells. And I was struggling at that time because I was just using the BSA standard. So trying to route cables and using larger down tubes just wasn't happening with the smaller shell. But if I wanted to use the larger shell, I'm now subjecting my customer to a lot of creaking and issues, especially if you're brazing or welding distortion to that tube. But when T47 came out, I was like, oh my, this is such good news. And unfortunately, $600 in taps and whatnot, but it's just, but I totally embraced it. And I've been embracing this new T-type transmission stuff, using the UDH style. I've just been loving it. I think it's great. I love the UDH that came out the last, the last two builds I've used. Three. I've used the UDH derailleur hanger. I think it's great. I mean, so there's some I definitely agree with, those two things. T47 UDH, I like those a lot.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, your perspective, especially because, most of us are armchair industry experts, and we just think about how it affects us as consumers, when a new standard comes out. But I imagine as a frame builder, standards can be pretty helpful in terms of how you can build bikes and making sure that they work across a broad range of uses and components and that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, most of them make sense. I understand. And sometimes any new standard comes out, there's going to be a resistance from the older crowd.
Yeah.
Either, I get it, they just got their bike last year and now suddenly it's outdated, stuff like that. Disc brakes was a really prime example for me. My first one I built was with quick release hubs because that's what was available. And then mountain bikes started doing the 12-142 standard for the rear through axles. And I was like, it's like, man, if that ever got and it did, and it just went through axles front and rear, that's when I was just overwhelmed. I am totally on board with disc brakes now. And the reason for it was it just stiffened everything up. I didn't hear any brake rub when I stood up, mashing those pedals going up a hill. And I didn't want to hear that. And it's just, anytime you hear even a slight rub, I'm thinking, oh, that's slowing me down. And it's more mental than anything else. I totally get it. But that was something that improved my frames. And it's a new standard. So by all means, it's a little you got to do the research and look at it first and understand it, and then you totally get it. At Boost, at first, I was like, oh, I don't know, moving aside. Well, now I can't swap my wheels from my cross bike to my mountain bike, and I don't get it. But once I built a frame and understood what it was doing for me for chain line and stuff like that, it's like, oh, cool. Okay. These engineers are actually kind of smart.
Wow. You don't hear that often. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about trends. Another one that I was curious about is internal cable routing. And you kind of mentioned this, like some of your customers, a lot of them probably are already running wireless drivetrains. And so are you seeing as many requests for internal cable routing, or a lot of people just saying, I don't need that anymore?
Obviously, if you're running, wireless SRAM or, DI2, so now we don't have to worry about, derailleur cables anymore. So the brake hose, because we're, everyone's running disc brakes.
Right.
So, yes, so definitely it's still request for me to say run the hose internal. I do it very tidy and seamless looking, and it just runs right through the frame. There's a lot of tricks I do with mitering the tubes and to get that all to work, where some people, when they build, they have to come out, say, at the bottom of the down tube, wrap around under the bottom bracket shell, re-enter the chainstay, and then come back out of the chainstay to the brake. And when I originally, years ago, came up with my internal routing, I didn't want to see any of that. To me, internal routing means all the way through. You enter once, you exit once. That's internally routed. So it definitely took some designs. It kind of evolved over the years to get to the way I do it now. And other people are doing the same. I think they've seen some pictures of mine, and again, that's fine. At least we're all getting to do something, and it's done right, where it's not going to be a brake hose rubbing against your crank spindle at any point, and a nice clean path. So that way, if you were running mechanical derailleurs, it's very clean, effortless shifting. There's no binding of the cable. But even with all the wireless stuff, definitely still running stuff internal, unless there's some of the adventure builds. Those have been external, and I totally get it. You're stuck way out there somewhere, and you're out of cell phone range, and you got to work on your bike on trail side. You're not pulling your cranks out to fish the cable out and stuff. You run it all external. So
what about you on your personal bikes that you build for yourself? Internal routing or external?
Been internal since the get-go, from when I started building.
Okay. Wow. All right.
The way I do it, and for me, and it being a shop mechanic over the years, has definitely influenced the way I've done it to make it super easy for people to set up and maintain it. So I learned a lot by fiddling with these other bikes and learning, that don't work too good, and this is much better, and stuff like that. So when they're internal, for example, my current titanium bike, I haven't touched it in the brake hose, and before that I had, when I was running mechanical, cyclocross racing and gravel, it would go for years before I touched the cables. If you put them out of the elements, they're good. So anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good point, that I guess a lot of us, we still have experience from many, many years ago when just components in general were less reliable, and we're imagining, constantly having to work on these things. But I feel like we're at a point now where you shouldn't have to be pulling cables and hoses all that often, unless something goes really wrong. So we're in a good place.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I get a little bit of resistance from it. It's like, I see your internal routing. It's like, but I don't want to have to maintain it. It's like, it's actually pretty easy, but it's like, I like to swap my cables out. And it's like, well, that's good, because now you can pull your cranks out, re-grease all that as well, and put it all back together. Now you refreshed all that stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, actually that's a good point. Okay, well, it kind of forced maintenance on other areas of the bike that are seldomly maintained.
Right. Yeah. It's a good way to look at it. So tell me, which projects are you most proud of? Is there a particular bike or a build you did for someone that really stands out for you?
Well, that's a great question. That's a tough one. I was kind of recently asked what was one of my favorite builds recently on a local group ride. And I told the lady, actually the bike I'm on, because it was the titanium gravel race, road race, whatever bike you want to do, because it's my first time actually ever welding titanium and making a titanium frame. And to me, I would see the titanium builders years ago, and it's like, golly, that's just a whole nother level of building. That's like, to me, that's like the top. That's unbelievable. They're just like, they're gods. And it's like, oh my God, I actually made one myself and riding it, 2 years down the road, and I'm still loving it. So that one's definitely was one of my favorites. God, there's just been so many.
Do you ever like have a hard time giving one up? Like you finish it and you're like, oh man, this ended up really cool. Like I want this for myself.
Yeah, there's a customer actually in Atlanta, and I think it was DI2. He's about my height. I was riding around. It's like, this is a cool bike. I just think all the parts that I want are on this thing, and I obviously built it up for him. Yeah, that was a little hard to give up. There is some times where I have my rack and they're sitting there waiting on either to get shipped, color choices and whatnot, and paint work, and they've been sitting there for a little bit, and they're finally gone, and there's like, it's gone now. That's like I had some time in this in part of my life, but now it's moved on, and sometimes you get a little empty feeling as you kind of walk this into the EPS center to get shipped off. But sometimes it's kind of cool because in some cases they're going halfway around the world, and they're going to be ridden somewhere else. I was just thinking the other day, it's like I have pieces of metal being ridden in Australia. I never would have thought that. And there's a guy in Japan riding one of my pieces of metal around. It's just kind of neat. So.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thinking about sort of projects that went the other way, have you ever had a project that was a disaster, or maybe one that just surprised you in another way?
There's, I'll probably have to say back before there were, adventure, a rando bike, randoneering touring bike. That was probably something I probably didn't want to do again because I don't do that style of riding. And it's all the little brazons and details and everything. It's like, I never thought I was going to get this thing done. And it came out good. Yeah. And everything's fine. Customer's super happy about it. It was just a lot of work. And I don't think I charged enough.
Right.
It was, I think at some points I was thinking, because I was having the cyclocross builds at that time. It's like I could have knocked out 2 cyclocross frames by the time of building this.
Yeah.
Another one was an electric bike. I made an electric bike and e-bike. It was fun. It was a lot of work, a lot of learning, but it was definitely, that was a process right there.
Yeah.
Stepping into something I wasn't really too familiar with again, but I pulled it off, and customer absolutely enjoys the bike, but that was a lot of work there. So
yeah. Wow.
I really love those gravel builds right now. I can just knock one of those out.
Yeah.
Left and right.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess too, as a consumer, I mean, it makes sense, but I wouldn't think about the fact that adding all these little brazons and things to a frame can really affect how long it takes to build it. I mean, you said twice as long potentially as like another bike, just with all the little options and things like that.
Oh, absolutely. And let's just say something simple as a frame pump peg. And I didn't have a frame pump with me. I don't carry a frame pump. I'm a CO2 kind of guy. Okay. And I don't have a frame pump that's going to fit this to mock it up to make sure I get the little peg in the right part of the frame. So it's like I contacted Silka. I said, hey, what are the dimensions of the pump so I can get it in that right area and have it look right? I think I modified a front rack to fit it, because you want that rack to be perfectly level when it's on the ground, fitting the fence. It's like all these rando things that I wasn't really understanding, but I was learning what they wanted in the styles. I mean, like I said, I pulled it off, but it was a lot of research and knowledge for something that I don't personally do, which is fine. I totally get it. But I'm more of the builder, definitely, that someone's going to just ride this thing every other day, potentially race it, that kind of build.
Yeah. That definitely makes the case for being selective about which projects you take on. And yeah, it's not like you're being snooty or being like, no, I just don't want to do that. It's, really, no, I've tried this and it's not my thing. There's a lot of parts involved, and I'd rather work on other projects.
Oh, absolutely. I've had some weird requests over the year that I had to turn down, some interesting ones. The one that comes to mind was I thought that maybe it might, but thankfully it got turned down from the sponsors who were that she was trying to get to build this frame and wheels. And what it was, apparently it was for a dog that can pedal a bicycle and it has the world record for how far it can go.
Oh, wow.
And something about wanting it to go even further by making a custom bike and wheels so that the dog can pedal this. It was that was. I had a lot of time involved with that.
Down?
Wow. That was a strange one.
Jeez, you could have been a world record holder.
Yeah, wow. And the person kept and they kept saying in capital letters in the email, "This is not a joke. Please contact me." So I was like, it's like, okay. So I was like, wow, this is for real.
Huh. Wow, that's amazing. So is Augusta a good place to be a frame builder?
I think so. It's kind of unique because there are not too many frame builders in the Southeast.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of, I guess in a way, it kind of fills that void if you wanted to have something custom made, but didn't want to, if you wanted to go see that person. So, I got a lot of people come from Atlanta, Charlotte, or whatever, because, 2.5 hour drive, not too bad. Come down the road, Greenville area, to either pick up their frame, meet me in person, initial visit to get sized, I'll take their measurements, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely, kind of unique. Currently, it's just me in the state, and actually Don Walker is probably one of the most famous frame builders in the world because he's the one who started NABS, the big show, and he's an hour and a half from me. So
okay, I didn't realize that. Where is he?
In Eatonton. Huh. It's just out near Madison. So
yeah. Huh.
Done some paint work for him, visited the shop, and super jealous of all the space, but I got air conditioning in my little thing.
Yeah. Is the writing community helpful there? I mean, is that kind of what got you sort of connected? I mean, it sounds like, you've been building since 2011, which, I mean, it's been a few years, but it's not that long ago. And so, yeah, do you feel like the community kind of enables you to make that leap and to say, yeah, there's a lot of people around here that could use this service and would support this? Yeah,
surprisingly, I've only built like a handful of frames for customers here in Augusta, and it's and it's just been outside of it's the Southeast, and then started venturing a little bit into the Northeast, Mid Atlantic, West Coast. And I was actually thinking about this the other day because I've been seeing unfortunately, some frame builders closing their doors, and some have just started out. And I think it's really hard to get past that point of where you built frames for your friends, and then to get somebody way outside of that radius to actually come to you to have something made. So, and luckily, I feel like I've kind of broken that barrier, punched through, and got outside my friends' radius and building for outside of it. I never thought somebody on the West Coast would want one of my bikes or anything. There's plenty of builders out there, and they've seen the bike or they like what they see, and they decided I'm going to get you to build my dream bike.
Yeah, that's super cool.
It's not a very easy business. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like a lot of businesses in the bike industry, and then, combining sort of art and bespoke creation. Yeah, it's definitely a tricky path. So what is your vision for the future of Zukas Cycles?
First and foremost, one day I'll finish my website if I ever gain time. I need help with that.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've been chugging along with an under construction website. I'm very good, I feel, at building a frame, but constructing a website, I need help. And one day I'll get that looking good.
It's got your email address on there, I think, right? So that's all you need.
Thank goodness for social media. I really feel that Instagram and Facebook helps me out a lot. I don't really advertise. I rarely go to any shows. I've been to NABS once. I've been to the Southeast Bike Expo years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was in once, and then the Philly Bike Expo once. I've gotten some stuff out of it, but I think social media presence and showing your work and builds really is what gets people's attention. You get more followers, and then people are saying, "Hey, can you check this guy out?" And they're like, "Oh, wow, I never knew about him." And a couple of years down the road, you're getting emails like, "Hey, I've been following you on Instagram, and I think I want you to build me a frame. These are pretty darn cool." So, website, and just keep going the way I'm going. So I'm totally happy with my customer base, the way things are going. As far as I just wish painting bikes to get a little easier. I wish there's a way to air condition my paint booth.
Yeah. I bet that's tough this time of year.
Oh.
Well, how would, not that you've expressed this, but how would a frame builder go about expanding their business, right? I mean, you're one guy. Obviously, if someone buys a bike from you, they want it to be built by you. And so, I mean, does it even make sense to say, like, you could expand a business like this, or is that even something like on your radar?
There's a builder in Montana that recently took one of his, from what I'm gathering, one of his very popular designs and basically went to Taiwan and said, "Hey, build me this." Oh. And I was like, man, that's kind of cool, because I do these once in a while, these stock geometry frames. There's a 52 centimeter-ish, 54 centimeter-ish, and a 56 centimeter-ish. And they're just a gravel build that you can ride on the road or whatever. And I just, from my years of doing geometry designs, I just feel that kind of fits a large amount of people. I price it right. I'm getting the option now to do some paint with them. They're kind of a hit to me. I never thought that. Yeah. Basically, you can get a frame right now, and it's kind of cool. It has the seat stays, which people like, and whatnot. And I always thought, like, well, if I went to Taiwan and got a bunch of these frames made, and you can powder coat them and all, but then it's like, where people are kind of coming to me because I made the frame.
Yeah. Well, you could just bend the seat stays and just send them a pile of seat stays.
That's right. I can say the main frame's welded there, and I weld on the rear seat stays and bend them in house or something. It's like, I can. I have thoughts with that. That'd be kind of cool, but then for being a one-man show, it'd be pretty hard to accommodate all that. But there's actually another person who really helps me a lot is my wife, Candace, and she does all my books and keeps me straight. I probably wouldn't be in the position now if it wasn't for her.
Yeah. Yeah, we forget about all the non-building stuff. We just imagine the frame builder, just constantly like with the welding helmet on and, just head down working. But yeah, there's all that other stuff. I mean, the website, obviously, like that's something that you don't have the time to get to, but it's part of running a business like that.
It's crazy. She helps out so much for stuff that I just kind of forgot about, paying a business license and my insurance coming up. Yeah, it definitely keeps me busy. There's a lot. When someone wants to get into it, it's like, hey, this looks really cool. I want to be a frame builder. It's like, okay. And it's like, okay, you need space to work. So either you're lucky and got a garage or workshop, or you're renting space. You need liability insurance. You need to insure all the stuff you have. You got to get a frame jig. Your welder, oxyacetylene torch, all these tube vendors potentially need all this machinery. I kind of laugh because someone asked me how much my first titanium frame. How much is that frame worth? And I said about $10,000 to $11,000. They're like, it's like after I got a new jig, I'd update all this stuff. I'd get air conditioning, all this, so it all adds up. So
right.
Insurance is, I think insurance and having a space to build is probably the biggest two things that can really hurt a lot of small frame builders if they're just starting out. paying rent. It's like, I can imagine trying to, luckily I have my own space on my property, which is great. And, I can imagine trying to pay rent every month, and, insurance is just, you got to have liability insurance. I mean, it's just part of it.
Right. Yeah. That part I imagine is really tough. Because most insurance companies are like, you do what? And we got to insure against what happening?
It's awful. Yeah. And I hate seeing that check leave here. It's just like, it's a necessary evil, and you have to have it. And it's just, I couldn't imagine trying myself or anybody without, building without insurance. I mean, that's just nuts. I mean, you have to have it. You're putting product out there, and things can happen. So you got to keep your butt covered.
Right. Well, Nate, thanks so much for taking the time to talk. I learned a ton about frame building, and I'm really stoked to see where you take your business.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the invite, and thanks for listening to me ramble on.
Well, we'll have a link to Zukas Cycle's website where you can see not a lot, but you'll get Nate's email address. And definitely check him out on Instagram as well. And we'll hopefully have a couple photos of some bikes in the show notes. That's all we've got this week. We'll talk to you again next week.